What's up, guys? We are back for another week of fights. This time it's UFC Las Vegas 52. Amanda Lemos taking on Jessica Andrade. And with that being the main event of the night, you can pretty much guess that the rest of the card might not have the best name value, the best entertainment value in some spots. I'm usually the last person in the world to, judge a fight card in the UFC based off of its name value. But I mean, even this week, they're making it hard for me. So we're going to try to find some spots to make some money on this card. There's some definite stay away spots, some very, very wide favorites in this card that probably shouldn't be as big of a favorite as they are. Some sketchy spots, but also some good ones too. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, kicking off this star-studded UFC card is Dean Barry taking on Mike Jackson. Dean, the Sniper Barry, making his long-awaited debut, if you want to call it that. These two were actually supposed to fight last year at some point. It fell through a couple times. I'm not sure why, but I'm also not sure why this fight is even taking place, except for the fact that Dean Barry is Irish, got a positive record on the regional scene, along with Ian Gary. Dean Barry, it's funny these two guys' names rhyme because they're both kind of like these cookie-cutter Irish guys that are trying to fill the void of Conor McGregor's fame over there for the Irish fans, and the UFC is really trying to give them the best possible route to be successful in the UFC. So Dean Barry gets a, hopefully a free win over Mike Jackson here. He is a minus 1,100 favorite, even worse than that in some spots I've seen. Mike Jackson plus 700 underdog roundabout. Mike the Truth Jackson, we saw twice already in the UFC, and they said he was never going to come back after his last performance, but here he is. So Mike Jackson, you would assume with the name Michael Jackson, he would at least have like some sort of fancy footwork or some smooth movement, but no, he's very, very flat-footed, so kind of disgracing the name Mike Jackson, honestly. He does have a nice tall frame for the division. He's 6'2", but yeah, not a whole lot to love. I mean, he got tapped out by Mickey Gall pretty early in their fight. Against CM Punk, he was hardly even able to outmuscle CM Punk in the grappling of that fight, and he ended up winning a decision that got later overturned to a no contest. But anyways, yeah, he really couldn't finish CM Punk on the feet. He looked very lackadaisical on the ground. Eventually, he just kind of had less bad cardio than CM Punk is how he ended up winning the fight, basically. But he doesn't look like that great of a gas tank himself. So I think he does have like a 3-6 amateur record, before all of that stuff happened. But since then, he's been, inactive, and God only knows if he is even going to be in fight shape for this fight. So Dean Barry, on the other hand, is 5'10", so still a pretty good frame for welterweight. 4-1 against absolutely abysmal competition, though. Is he 4-1? 4 first-round knockouts, 1 early second-round submission loss, all to people with horrible records. I mean, he beat a guy who was 1-1, 1-1, 7-1 in the UAE Warriors, even though that guy didn't look that great himself. But then 6-30 is his most recent opponent, and he lost to a guy who was like 2-5. So I didn't just wiki cap all these numbers. I did go and watch all of these fights. They weren't the most exciting or most impressive fights. Even Dean Barry's knockouts, not the most impressive, and it's hard to judge against this low-level competition. But, at least he's putting these guys away. His gas tank doesn't look that great, even. He had to fight off submissions against the guy in UAE Warriors. He got his back taken down pretty easily, managed to stay safe. This is a fight that was after he got submitted in round 1, so maybe he had been at least improving and working on that hole in his game a bit. But his gas tank still looks pretty bad after having to grapple and fight off submissions. He looked pretty slow on the feet after that. Managed to get one of the sloppiest knockouts on that guy, but man, it doesn't look like this. Looks like the fight that would be a perfect level for him is Mike Jackson. He really needs to, if they're going to preserve this guy's record, this is the type of opponent that they need to give him. Mike the Truth Jackson, I don't see him winning this fight. I mean, you would assume that the value would at least be on him at plus 700, but I don't even think that. It's just the fact that he's been inactive for so long. At least we saw Dean Barry fight just in December of this past year, so he's got that going for him. The younger guy, seemingly more athletic. I just don't see any offensive threat coming from Mike Jackson. You would expect a guy to relentlessly go for takedowns against Dean Barry and try to choke him out. It's probably a possibility, but, we have nothing to go off of from Mike Jackson. The over-under is a way that I see people calling to attack this card because it is a pick'em price tag, 50-50 probability both ways. Over 1.5 rounds, -115. Under 1.5 rounds, -115. I see people calling for the over, and probably because Mike Jackson looks big enough, looks tough, maybe physically he could endure the early storm from Dean Barry, the smaller guy. But and I know Mike Jackson's gone to decisions before, but Dean Barry's never been to decision. The more active guy, I would probably lean the under 1.5 on this, but I don't think it's enough of a lean under 1.5. To really warrant, I don't see much value on that. It's still a coin flip, so I don't know why you would potentially want to burn your money with that. I'd say, if anything, I've seen fight doesn't go to decision at -240. That might be a decent parlay piece or just a decent piece on its own because both guys' cardio looks pretty poor in my opinion. So I'm going to call Dean Barry to win by round 1 KO. There's a strategy I think you can make money on this fight that a lot of people aren't talking about. I haven't seen any big handicapper talk about this, so this might be some gold for you guys. But if you go give Mike the Truth Jackson a follow on Twitter, he has a pinned tweet that he's after he knocks out Dean Barry, he's going to give away $50 worth of Bitcoin to 4 lucky winners who retweet his post and follow some pages. So not many people know who he is, so not many people are going to enter this little contest. And being Mike the Truth Jackson, I don't think he would lie about such a thing. I'm sure he's going to give away $50 in Bitcoin. So that's probably the best way you're going to make money on this fight. But I am going to take Dean Barry to win this fight by round 1 KO. Up next, a 205-pound fight between Felipe Lins and Marcin Prachnio. A fight I'm actually pretty interested in seeing the result of because these two guys could not have different career trajectories right now, whereas Marcin Prachnio started on as bad of a foot as you can start on in the UFC, going 0-3, all first-round knockouts to Sam Alvey, Magomed Ankalaev, and finally slow Mike Rodriguez. So, not a great bag of people to get, aside from Ankalaev, you can forgive that one. But the other two, not the best competition to start your UFC career losing to. Looks like he's got an abysmal chin, and then he comes there against Khalil Rountree, manages to double him up on strikes over 3 rounds and win the fight, and then goes in there and wins in the second round against Ike Villanueve by a beautiful body kick. Just looked good the entire time. Got a performance of the night bonus for that one. And Felipe Lins kind of peaked in 2018 after a busy career. He won the PFL, heavyweight tournament there, not against the best competition, but won that $1 million. And then things started to go south for him because he had some sort of knee injury or something that was bugging him, kept him out of competition for the entirety of 2019 in the PFL. He finally fixes whatever the issue is, comes to the UFC, starts off 0-2 at that point. So his career starts kind of going downhill, losing to Andrei Arlovsky, even though he had his moments in that fight, and then to Tanner Boser. So, Felipe Lins, 36 years old, 6'2", with a 79-inch reach, a decent frame for heavyweight. He was on the smaller side of the heavyweight division, now dropping magically to 205 pounds after pulling out of a dozen fights over the past couple of years. The last time we saw him against Boser was in June of 2020, so it's been some time. I can't imagine, and this is going to be part of why I will be picking Marcin Prachnio in this fight. I can't imagine him fixing all of these injuries, all of these things that have kept him out of competition, and then trying to, achieve success in a new weight class. It just seems like a lot to ask. He does have decent boxing, decent power. His boxing is best up close. Of course, he's not very good at getting into range or fighting at range, at least recently. Marcin Prachnio, however, has pretty good range control in his last couple fights. Good power, good form. He switches stances occasionally, throwing his opponents off, as we saw in the Ike Villanueva fight. And his volume looks pretty good as well over 3 rounds. So it's a tough fight to really be that confident either way, even though Felipe Lins is, outside of the octagon and all of the narrative of his injuries and things like that, I think he would have been the bigger favorite had it not been for that, just because the durability of Prachnio is, been proven to be pretty horrendous. So even though he's turning things around, I will go with him here. Minus 125, slight favorite for Prachnio. Money has come in on him over the week. And now Felipe Lins is now plus 105. Prachnio, the younger guy, the taller guy, less reach by a good margin, but just seems to be a little bit quicker these days anyways, being at 205 pounds. It's going to come down to the amount of fight cancellations, inconsistency in his career, and just looks like he's past his prime at this point. I'm going to take Prachnio to win this fight inside the distance somewhere, probably later in the fight, around 2 or 3. I think the most dangerous time is going to be round 1 for Prachnio. Felipe Lins can catch him with something up close. We've seen Prachnio controlled against the cage. If there's like short hooks or elbows, he's susceptible to those early on. But if he can survive that first round, I think he wins this fight. The over-under is set at 1.5 as well. I'm not quite sure about touching that. If anything, I would touch the over, but that's minus 150 in a heavyweight fight with two guys that don't have the best durability right now. So fight doesn't go to decision, minus 205 I've seen. I wouldn't mind that, but give me Prachnio by round 2 or 3 stoppage. Up next should be a banger of a fight at bantamweight. This is actually up a weight class for one of the guys here. Aoriqileng, I believe that's how you pronounce this guy's name. The Mongolian murderer fighting out of China. Aoriqileng is facing Cameron Else. Both guys kind of new to the UFC. This will be Aoriqileng's third bout. He's 0-2 so far, facing Cameron Else in his second fight, who's 0-1 so far. Cameron Else, common theme on this card are guys who haven't fought in a while. We haven't seen Cameron Else since he got stopped in the second round by Kyler Phillips, which was all the way back in October of 2020. So it's been quite a while for Cameron Else. Aoriqileng, we just saw a fight not too long ago against Cody Jourdain. Both of Aoriqileng's fights went to decision, both of them very close decisions. And I like Aoriqileng a lot. 5'7". He's got a 20-11 record, most of which, of course, taking place against low-level competition outside of the UFC. He's only 28 years old, though. He racked up quite a record for being so young. Cameron Else, 10-5 record, 71-inch reach, 5'9", the slightly bigger guy. Like I said, this is a new weight class for Aoriqileng, who was fighting at flyweight. So I think that might benefit him. That's not too big of a jump for as big as he is. And maybe it'll actually aid him in not having to cut so much weight. I think this will be more of a stand-up fight. Cameron Else does have a lot of submissions on his record, a lot of defensive, like front choke submissions, things that he's not actively going for from what I've seen on the footage so much. And, Aoriqileng, not to be too prejudiced here, but one guy's from England, one guy's from China. You wouldn't really expect this to be much of a wrestle-heavy fight here. So I assume it'll take place in the feet. And one thing that Aoriqileng has shown so far in both of his losses, both of them actually kind of impressing me in defeat, is he keeps up with his opponent. He's really not taking too many unanswered strikes without giving them right back. Racking up triple digits against Jeff Molina in the war that they had, early last year. Then he fought Cody Jourdain, mostly lost. He actually outlanded Cody Jourdain, albeit slightly, but he just lost the grappling sequences, got taken down 5 out of 10 times and controlled a lot of that fight. So it was kind of too hard for him to work back to win the decision there. He definitely lost, but, it was making it close, at least striking-wise. So I think he could do that here. He showed, 3-round ability, 3-round grit, the ability to take punishment. Cameron Else has only been a decision, I think, 1 time in defeat. The rest of them were all ending in finish, which, is probably juiced up that fight doesn't go to decision number. I'm just not too sold on that, just because I'm not saying it can't happen, but I'm just not sold enough to bet a fight doesn't go or an under in this bout, just because Aoriqileng has a lot of finishes as well, but they're not at the same level of competition, of UFC competitors, kind of a lot of unknown guys. So And we've just seen him go to decision a couple times here. So I'm not so sure that we'll see. I think his durability from Aoriqileng is enough to keep me off if a fight doesn't go. Although he definitely has the ability to inflict punishment on Cameron Else and maybe wear him down in the later part of the fight. But I'm going to call Aoriqileng to win by decision. He's one of my more confident fighters of the week, honestly. Minus 225 favorite at this point. Money's poured in on him. He's become a much bigger favorite over the past couple days. So Cameron Else can be had for plus 185. I do think that this fight plays out closer than the odds indicate, but I still think Aoriqileng is the rightful favorite, rightfully a moderate to strong favorite, and I think he'll win this fight. I'm going to call it by decision here. Up next, another long-awaited return from a guy who's been sidelined for a little over 3 years now, is Tyson Pedro taking on Ike Villanueve at 205 pounds. This is an odd fight, once again, not only because of a guy who we haven't seen in a long time, but because Tyson Pedro is coming back after 3 years, a slew of surgeries to his knee, and he's a minus 600 favorite over Ike Villanueve, who's the plus 435 underdog currently. Even the inside the distance, Pedro winning inside the distance over Ike is something crazy, like, minus 200 and more. It's something insane. So 6'3", 79-inch reach, very, very good frame for 205 has Tyson Pedro against 6'3", 73-inch reach for Ike Villanueva. Both are pretty big guys at 205. Tyson Pedro, more of the true light heavyweight, I would say, pretty tall, more slender physique. 38 years old for Ike Villanueva, so he's giving up some years in, in age there as well. Definitely at the end of his career, if he does not get a victory here for Ike, he's lost 4 out of his 5 UFC fights, all of them by knockout. So you can see why those inside the distance props are going to be so pricey, because they assume if he loses, he'll lose by knockout or by, in Tyson Pedro's case, maybe submission even. Tyson Pedro doesn't have the best chin himself. He's been dropped by a lot of guys, but he's tough as nails, manages to get back up and finish some of those fights. The much higher level of competition back when he was in the UFC against Khalil Roundtree, Paul Craig, Alir Latifi, OSP, and then finally his fight back in December of 2018 was against Shogun Rua, who he almost beat before he ended up tearing his ACL and eventually losing the fight. But pretty good back and forth fight there. Like I said, he has fought the much better competition, but it's been so long since he's been there. He had a weird story about his surgeries where he heard it in training, also heard it in the Shogun Rua fight. He had like a surgery kind of not take, and he had to get another one, I believe, is what happened. And they said basically, look, if you return to action too fast and we have to do it again, you might not fight ever again. So he kind of took it slow, and he had some fights scheduled last year even, but they fell through for whatever reason. So Ike Villanueva, good boxing, good power. Definitely going to be the slower man here from what I can tell. Tyson Pedro, back when he was fighting, his stand-up didn't look awful, although like I said, he was hittable. But these were against much better level of competition than Ike Villanueva. I see Tyson Pedro winning this fight. It's just going to be, does he have the confidence, to go in there and start fast? Or is he going to kind of make it a slow grinding fight? He's got pretty good takedowns. He could definitely take this fight to the ground and win there. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt for Tyson Pedro. 5 career submissions on his record, 5 submission losses on the record of Ike Villanueva, who's never really fighting guys who are actively taking him down, at least in the UFC. So I see Pedro winning this fight. It's hard to make a clear-cut crystal ball prediction of how this will go down, just because there's so many questions on how Pedro is going to look coming back after such a long layoff. You rarely see people coming back after 3.5 years. So I'm going to call Pedro to win. Definitely not playable in the money line, not playable inside the distance. If there was some weird prop of like Pedro by submission that was super juicy, maybe I'd go that route, but I think everything on this fight, betting-wise, is very, very juiced. But I'll call Tyson Pedro to, start slow, get his feet wet in the first round, tire out Ike Villanueva. There might be some sketchy spots, or maybe he eats a punch from Ike, survives, and then eventually in round 2 comes out there, takes down a tired Ike Villanueva and chokes him out. So give me Tyson Pedro, second round submission. Up next at welterweight, we've got Dwight Grant taking on Sergey Khandozhko. Khandozhko is another one of these guys who's coming back to the UFC after a long layoff. Not that he was cut or anything, but he was just on the sideline since the end of 2019, I think it was. So it's been a while since we've seen him for one reason or another. Some canceled bouts in there, maybe some sideline due to injury as well. But Sergey Khandozhko is interesting because he's got a pretty massive record for being a younger guy. He's only 29 years old still, 6'1", 74-inch reach, so a decent frame for welterweight. Kickboxer style, even though he's from Russia, you'd expect him to be one of these grappling machines. And he does have kind of a generalist style and some skills on the ground as well, some submissions on his record scattered throughout. But more of a kickboxer base, fights at range pretty well, good power in his hands and feet. Pretty durable as well. Pretty technical striker, although he does leave himself open to be hittable at times. Dwight Grant, much older guy, 37 years old, 6'1", 77-inch reach. A very odd physique, long limbs. I mean, you're going on 77-inch reach at 170, pretty hard to come by. And it helps out with his striking style. Very, good feints, good counter puncher, power in his hands. Although he's been put out too, we saw from Daniel Rodriguez a few years ago. So my issue with Dwight Grant, although I do like him, is it's just hard when you put money on Dwight Grant. He doesn't seem to go in there and fight for your money. I mean, he's got this, kind of picking his shots, sort of tempo to his fighting. Like I said, he does throw some pretty decent feints, fakes with the knees, some decent footwork, stays at range well, but doesn't engage nearly as much to win a fight decisively, and that's why he has so many split decisions on his record. So even though he has shown toughness and he has shown power of his own, he's just so low volume at times, picking his shots, and when that power punch never comes, he finds himself, kind of looking at a very iffy fight in the eyes of the judges. So he is a slight underdog here, I believe. Let me check the odds to make sure that's still current, because I think I saw them kind of bouncing around that pick'em price tag. I think Dwight Grant is now, you can still find him at, plus 100, plus 105 is out there for Dwight Grant, minus 125 favorite for Sergey Khandozhko. Khandozhko's 1-1 in the UFC. His most recent, before he had the hiatus, his most recent loss was to Rustam Khabilov, who he was out-controlled like 4 minutes of each round in that fight. And like I said, I don't see Dwight Grant really having that style of fight. He's not going to be the threat of taking down the kickboxer in Khandozhko and controlling him for massive amounts of time and being that successful like Rustam Khabilov was against Sergey. So based on that, I'm going to expect that at 29 years old, I think that layoff, this is all narrative, but I think it should have done him some good. He should be back in the gym making improvements. I think I'm going to trust him to do more on the feet. If this is going to be a kickboxing fight at range, I expect Sergey to be the more comfortable, fighter out there, land more, and make this more of a decisive fight. And I think he can win inside the distance or by decision, whereas I think Dwight Grant's best chance is to land something powerful. Otherwise, he's looking at another iffy, low-volume fight where he makes it competitive with his opponent, too competitive against his opponent here, and, probably drops the ball on a decision. So give me Sergey Khandozhko to come back, play a safe fight, outland Dwight Grant, at least 2 out of 3 rounds for a decision win. Up next is a catchweight bout at 190 because stepping in for Kopylov against Jourdain Wright is Marc-Andre Barriault. Barriault coming back just a couple months after a first round, like 15 or 17 second knockout by Chidi Njokuani. So a guy who was known for his toughness in Marc-Andre Barriault, his durability, and he got knocked out by, a very formidable opponent, a guy with, known for having explosive striking ability. He got caught. I'm not going to hold that much against his durability, but here he is, a minus 180 favorite, stepping in on short notice against Jourdain Wright, plus 155 underdog. Jourdain Wright, obviously known for his kill or be killed sort of style. He's never actually been in his entire 12 and it should be a 12-3 record he has, but they call it a 12-2 record. His entire record, he's never actually gotten out of 1.5 rounds. So every single fight of his has ended early round 2 at the latest. Mostly him finishing a lot of lower level guys by knockout or really, really low level guys by submission. If you watch some of those fights where he out grapples guys, I mean, they kind of have no idea what they're doing. Anyways, like I said, he has that one no contest on the Dana White Contender Series where he got knocked out by Fluffy Hernandez, who tested positive for marijuana. So he should be 12 wins, 3 losses. His other losses were to Bruno Silva. He got brutally knocked out by, and who else was it? Joaquin Buckley knocked him out sort of in round 1 and early round 2 as well. Stopped him within seconds of that second round starting. So Jourdain Wright, does he have the potential? I mean, obviously he's facing a guy now who just lost, by a KO in the first round. That's Jourdain Wright's specialty, right? So that probably is aiding in him not being a bigger underdog here. But, I'm not the type of guy, I'm not the type of sports bettor in general to bet on a guy who's got just that one type of finishing ability. I could see Marc-Andre Barriault winning this fight in a number of ways. I could see him winning it inside the distance if he can just survive the early storm of Jourdain Wright. I could see him winning it by 3-round decision too. And that's why I like Marc-Andre Barriault here. I mean, he had that unlucky, got caught by a very, very fast, powerful overhand right, countered over the top early in the first round in his last fight. I don't like the fact that he's coming in on short notice or so quickly after that knockout, but I think he's tough enough to not hold that knockout against him too much. He's got good 3-round cardio, good grinding ability, ground and pound is pretty strong, and if he doesn't get in one of those like he did against Abu Azaitar, even though he was successful there, if he doesn't get into one of those types of slug it out brawls in the early going of this fight, I think he should be good. So after coming off of a shocking first round loss, I think he'll play it safe and weather the early storm, not give Jourdain Wright too many abilities. Even though he is the smaller man here, I think he still can stay safe against Jourdain Wright. I do think he's the better mixed martial artist just about everywhere that this goes. And I'm going to take the guy in Marc-Andre Barriault, 13-5 record, against some pretty good competition compared to Jourdain Wright. I'm going to take him to win. Probably in the second round, after Jourdain Wright fails to get that knockout early on, he'll probably, come out looking like a shell of himself in round 2, somehow get taken down or reversed on the ground, and I think he'll get TKO'd by ground and pound by Marc-Andre Barriault. So I think the price tag is just about right. I don't see a whole lot of extra value on Marc-Andre in this fight. I don't see enough of a price tag on Jourdain Wright as an underdog. If you're going to bet Jourdain Wright, bet him first round knockout. If you really were feeling strong about it and you think for some reason Marc-Andre's durability is shot. But I'm taking the guy with way more tools to win, much more proven track record as an MMA fighter. Give me Marc-Andre Barriault, like I said, round 2 TKO. Up next, we've got a fun fight at flyweight between Manel Kape and Sue Mudaerji. Both guys very, very explosive for being at the 125 weight class, a class that's not known for its finishing potential, but these guys pack a punch. Manel Kape has 11 career knockouts against some pretty high-level competition, and Sue Mudaerji has 13. So these guys are potent finishers. Neither of them have actually been knocked out or TKO'd themselves either. So an interesting fight here. Manel Kape is going to be, rightfully so, the favorite, minus 190. Like I said, he's faced the higher level of competition, both outside of the UFC and in the UFC so far. Sue Mudaerji, plus 160 underdog. I'm very impressed with Sue Mudaerji so far. He's got a very diverse array of strikes, very clean striking in the distance. 26-year-old kid, 5'8", 72-inch reach, and a 15-4 record so far. He dropped his debut against Louis Smolka by an armbar, I believe it was, pretty early in the fight. He comes back with a very amazing KO over Malcolm Gordon in the first round or first minute of their fight too. So, after his victory a year ago, he got sidelined with some sort of knee injury, and now he's making his return, a little over a year later. So another one of these comeback situations where guys coming back off of injury. I memean, this is honestly just the story of every single fight in this card. It's pretty crazy. Slightly bigger guy compared to Manel Kape, who's 5'5", 68-inch reach, 28 years old. So both pretty young guys, should be improving. Manel Kape is 2-2 in the UFC. He came in as an alternate for, like the sub for a flyweight title fight. Ended up fighting Pantoja, losing that decision just due to inactivity. He has the same story in his next fight against Matus Nicolau. Loses the fight, pretty close fight. He might have even won that one, but just not doing enough to get the victory. Since then, he comes back with 2 first-round exciting knockouts, one over Ode Osborne, one over Zalgas Samagulov in his last fight. So he's definitely riding the ship here and getting some exciting, knockouts and stuff like that. So now he's on a 2-fight win streak out of his 4 fights in the UFC. My issue with the guy is not his talent. My issue with the guy, I was actually a big fan of his before he came to the UFC, and I was so excited to, load up and bet on him in his debut. And unfortunately, he just is such a showman, and that's part of why I like him. He definitely loves showboating. He loves getting highlight reel knockouts. I'm sure he was excited to fight on the big stage, but he seems to, in my mind, he seems to value being an exciting fighter and getting highlight reels more than he does winning the fight. And I think that is why he picks his punches, why he picks his shots so carefully, looking for that one fight-ending shot, even though he's at flyweight, and he ends up getting out-volumed by his opponent. And losing the fight, or at least making it way too close to, for comfort. So that's my issue here. He does have a good ground game too, career submissions, a good wrestling base that he's shown overseas, not shown so much in the UFC. And like I said, I think that's just because he wants to be this exciting star in the division, and he needs to, so it might be like a fight IQ, a showboating issue with him, but I think he can win this fight in any way. I think if he goes to the wrestling, he could win minutes on the ground and win a decision. I think if he goes to the wrestling and the grappling, he could, expose Mudaerji and get a submission. I think he could also, he's got the chance to, over the course of 3 rounds on the feet, knock out Mudaerji. But, he'd be in the most danger there because Mudaerji is, a pretty good striker and powerful striker in his own right. But my biggest fear is that he stands with Mudaerji, has the bigger moments and the bigger, more damaging shots, but the toughness of Mudaerji holds up. And meanwhile, Manel Kape is getting outscored by significant and total strikes in the feet. That's my biggest fear for this fight. But that's, I would have to be assuming that Manel Kape doesn't go for the wrestling, doesn't go for more activity in this fight and just picks his shots. It's a big possibility. Because of the total skill set and the avenues to win, I will pick my guy Manel Kape, star boy, to win this fight. It's just I don't have the most confidence in him because of just him wanting to be the star of the division and pick his shots and get outpointed. I think Mudaerji, with his the speed of his hands, the speed of his kicks, the diverse array of strikes he can throw in this fight, I think he can win the fight just based on volume, but that's how I think he wins. I think Manel Kape has more avenues to win, so officially I'll pick him. Confidence is not there very much at all. Definitely not a minus 170, or what is it, minus 190. Definitely not minus 190's worth of confidence on this pick, but give me Manel Kape to win by decision here. Women's flyweight bout between Macy Barber and Montana De La Rosa. 2 women that are pretty young in the division. Both have a decent amount of experience in the UFC at this point for being as young as they are. Macy Barber, only 23, almost 24 years old. And Montana De La Rosa, the underdog, 27 years old, 5'7", 68-inch reach. So the underdog here, plus 160 underdog. Macy Barber about a minus 190 and a climbing favorite. So Macy Barber, what can you say? She's coming off of I think a stolen victory over Miranda Maverick. I mean, I know that she really scratched and clawed her way to victory in the 3rd round, but I think she clearly lost rounds 1 and 2 of that fight against Miranda Maverick last year. But either way, she is always having the aggression in her favor in her fights. especially early on when she made her debut, she looked very, very violent against some lesser tier competition. But it's still something you have to take notice in these women's divisions, is when you can have somebody like Maycee Barber that just wants it more, shows, just yelling, ground and pound, coming forward the entire time. That seems to really play well, in the eyes of the judges, even more so compared to the men's divisions for some reason. So that's something to look for in this fight. That aggression seems to have died off just a little bit after she had that knee reconstruction after, I believe it was the fight with Roxanne Modaerji, where she lost her first fight in her professional career. Tough as nails is Maycee Barber. You've got to give her that. She is very tough. But her striking, especially the later the fight can get, even though she is pushing forward, her striking can get very, very sloppy. And I think it's going to be tough against somebody who's got a longer reach than her in Montana De La Rosa. Maycee Barber also can do very, very well when she realizes she's down and she comes back in rounds 2 and mostly round 3 and tries to right that wrong in the fight and finish strong. That's a great trait for, both male and female divisions. I like to see that trait in fighters. We talked about Charles Jourdain and how he did that in his last fight against Aoriqileng. That's kind of what Maycee Barber does, especially like in her last fight against Miranda Maverick. Very admirable trait, but still doesn't trade the fact that you're down. You may be down 1 or 2 rounds, and why would you make it that close? So if she can start a little bit quicker in this fight and have more success early on, I think she'll have a chance at winning the fight. But Montana De La Rosa has kind of the kryptonite in that, she goes for the takedowns relentlessly, and she can really rack up control time. We saw that in her last victory where she stopped Ariane Lipski. I could see her countering the wild, aggressive, moving forward pace of Maycee Barber and changing levels on her, getting the ground control time, and beating her that way, And that's kind of how I see this fight. I think it's close enough, much closer than the line indicates, that I want to lean the underdog here in Montana De La Rosa. I think that, like I said, Maycee Barber just, she has a lot of good striking metrics, and her significant strikes landed metrics look amazing compared to her opponents. But that's mostly because of the, like I said, when she made her debut, she looked really, really good and violent against, fighters like the Hannah Cipher fight where she stopped her. I think that really is padding a lot of her metrics here in the striking realm. Her volume has not been that great in her past couple fights. So, even though she's fought, I think, the higher level of competition at a younger age, I think both of these women are young enough to be making improvements. And unless Maycee Barber really, really patched up her takedown and grappling defense, which she may have, I'm going to take Montana De La Rosa to have the more complete game and to counter that aggression with some grappling and control time. At an underdog price, I think you can do worse. I think the value is on Montana De La Rosa. I'd even look for her by decision as a prop if it was juicy enough. So give me a Montana De La Rosa to win this fight. Up next, a fun featherweight fight between Charles Air Jourdain and Lando Groovy Vannata. Lando Vannata making his second fight here in the UFC at featherweight. He was, most of his career was at 155 lightweight, and then he was briefly at welterweight as well. 30 years old, I think he's still young enough to make that switch in weight classes successfully. Charles Jourdain, 5'9", so the same height between these guys, slightly longer reach for Charles Jourdain, 69-inch reach, only 26. Charles Jourdain, especially based off of his last fight and how dominantly he managed to close out that fight against Aoriqileng in the 3rd round. He's a minus 125 favorite over Lando Vannata, the slight underdog, plus 105 or so. It's a fun fight. I think it's a close fight. Metrics, based on the metrics, you've got the advantage goes to Charles Air Jourdain on the feet as far as how much volume, how much striking he throws, how many significant strikes he lands per 15 minutes. The edge goes pretty heavily to Charles Jourdain. Lando Vannata, not the worst striking metrics in the world, but he was fighting, I think, the stiffer competition and up a weight class. So you got to factor in those things when you look at the metrics there for these guys, who each guy has faced. I think Lando Vannata, they both have traded wins and losses and a draw, mixed in there. So they've had kind of an odd, hot and cold record on their UFC resume. But so this kind of lines up to be a pretty competitive fight in my eyes. The guy who I think is going to have the more well-rounded game, the more paths to victory and the more areas to kind of lean on in this fight is Lando Vannata, the underdog. I think he's got, he showed his last fight against Mike Grundy, split decision win, where he, was able to mix in striking, mix in the takedowns, and, really, he does that in a lot of his fights too. You'll see if he's facing a guy where it's getting a little bit dicey on the feet, he'll mix in the wrestling, mix in some control time against the cage and on the ground. And it's something that I like. It's really, whether he wins or loses, he'll try to do this strategy. It's a pretty high IQ thing that he does. And, a lot of high-level guys do this. Like I said, he's been fighting better competition up at lightweight when he's kind of a smaller guy. So the fact that he can make featherweight now at only 30 years old, I think it bodes well for him. Charles Jourdain, very, very skilled striker. I think Lando Vannata can handle the pressure of Charles Jourdain and, do just enough competitively to hang with him on the feet. And at the end of the round, when things get dicey, I think he can, steal the round with some control time, get the takedowns. Charles Jourdain, not the best takedown defense. When people do train them together, he will eventually be on the ground. He's pretty strong, especially early in the fight. He can get back to his feet. But like I said, I think Lando Vannata can just use that as a way to steal the round. When things are close enough on the feet, maybe Lando Vannata has some of the better moments, get some counters in there, but Charles Jourdain was pressuring forward the whole time, getting the better, volume numbers. Then Lando Vannata at the end of that round can, switch, get a takedown, get some control time, win the round in a top position. And I think he wins himself a 3-round decision. So give me Lando Vannata plus 105 underdog. I think money is actually coming in on Lando Vannata, and for good reason. I'll take him to win this fight. Next at 155, we've got Claudio Puelles stepping up against Clay the Carpenter Guida. Clay Guida, one of the most, grizzled veterans you'll have in the UFC these days, 40 years old, and not really fighting like a 40-year-old. He's winning fights, coming off of an impressive win. Lately he's been fighting guys almost his own age in Mark Madsen and, Leonardo Santos. But, his cardio doesn't look to have fallen off that much. It looks a little bit worse than it used to these days for Clay Guida, just because I think he switched to this really heavy grappling style, returning to his wrestling roots. And I think he'll try to do the same here against Claudio Puelles and maybe have some success. Claudio Puelles, a pretty generally good fighter, good grappling, which he displayed against Jourdain Levitt too. To stay safe against that guy is saying something. So, and he's on a nice 4-fight win streak here. So I like the momentum. I like the youth for the 26-year-old Claudio Puelles. I like the size of Claudio Puelles. I think that's all going to play into his hand here. The issue would be if Clay Guida manages to take him down, stay safe, since he's really seen everything that a mixed martial artist has to offer offensively, does Clay Guida. He's got that intangible experience and grit, and all the guys that have really given him trouble in the past are high-level guys, either title challengers or just, really salty UFC veterans. And I think Clay Guida has learned a lot. I think he's worked on this, this submission defense. And I don't see Claudio Puelles finishing Clay Guida unless it's very, very late in the fight and maybe Clay Guida falls apart. Maybe you see a decline based on his age in this fight. But that would all be... That would all be speculation, I really don't think he looks that bad for 40 years old. He's one of these guys, almost like a Yoel Romero, where he's super old, but you wouldn't really guess it based on how they fight over 3 rounds, So taking a look at where the odds currently are for this fight, it looks like a dead even pick'em, -110 to -110. Clay Guida, the slight underdog in some spots. I've seen -105 or even money on him. So, this fight plays out close enough where I would slightly lean Clay Guida just based on what I've seen. The ageist in me, I'm usually one of these guys that, as a sports bettor, as a handicapper and predictor, I would, that's a big red flag to see this big of an age gap here. I'd see, we probably see the finished product of Clay Guida generally and, an improving Claudio Puelles, but we're kind of seeing an improving Clay Guida as well, the way that he plays these smart fight IQ fights. And I could see him really just racking up control time against Claudio Puelles, and I think that's a viable option for him. I'm going to take Clay Guida to win the fight very, very slightly. I can't be that confident in a 40-year-old man, but I'll take Guida to grind out a decision here and win at least rounds 2 and 3. Okay, a short notice heavyweight fight here. I'm not quite sure where in the fight card they're going to place this one, but Alexander Romanov taking on Chase Sherman. Chase Sherman now, I thought he was cut. I'm not sure if they're bringing him back just for this fight or what, but midweek fight notice for Chase Sherman against an undefeated monster of a man in Alexander Romanov. One of these guys who's a real heavyweight, cuts down to 265, 15-0, 6'2", 75-inch reach. Chase Sherman's a big guy for heavyweight, but not physically like Romanov. He's 6'4", 32. Yeah, it's surprising that Chase Sherman's actually the older guy here by a bit, a longer reach, but I mean, we're talking about Alexander Romanov. I think we're opening up at like minus 12 to minus 1,400 favorite here against Chase Sherman, plus 700 underdog, maybe more. But I mean, it kind of makes sense in a way. I mean, you're looking at a guy who's undefeated, mostly by stoppage, 15-0. Just a complete monster, Moldovan savage in Alexander Romanov. Chase Sherman is 15-9 in his career, coming off of a 3-fight losing streak in the UFC. This is his second stint in the UFC. And before it wasn't much better either when he was cut. I mean, we're looking at a guy who's 15-9 in Chase Sherman, right? So 9 losses. 8 of those losses have been in the UFC, and only 3 of his 15 wins have been in the UFC. So clearly he doesn't really belong in the UFC division here. So I don't know. I see this being a case where the only way that Romanov loses is if he, is beating the skull of Chase Sherman for so long, and for some reason the referee doesn't stop it, and Romanov has like a heart attack or something, and still has to go out for a third round and loses. That has to be like or just a heavyweight. Heavyweight is volatile. Maybe Chase Sherman lands a lucky punch early on, but I would assume that Chase Sherman is going to win this fight extremely early by some sort of Hail Mary shot, or he wins it very, very, very late if he somehow survives. But I see Romanov not giving Chase Sherman the opportunity. I see him putting him on his back, within the opening bell, and getting a TKO stoppage, probably in the first round, maybe in the second if it takes that long. But give me Alexander Romanov pretty confidently to win by stoppage. Okay, we've made it to the main event of the evening. It is Jessica Andrade taking on Amanda Lemos. This is a big step up in competition for Amanda Lemos, but I guess it's time since she's on a win streak here and a very good record. So there's not many cards to shuffle in these women's divisions. So it's time for these two to square off. Jessica Andrade, rightfully so, a favorite, minus 190 over the plus 155 underdog Amanda Lemos. Now, it's a big size advantage for Amanda Lemos, but Jessica Andrade is no stranger to that, right? 5'1", 65-inch reach. She's going to have a size disadvantage against everybody, so she's used to that. But former champion, has losses recently to champions. Literally the best women's fighters ever, or who she's fought, who she's beaten, and who she's lost to recently. And she's bounced back against, you want to talk about her being used to being disadvantaged size-wise. Katlyn Chookagian takes her out. We're talking about Cynthia Calvillo, ends her back in September in her last fight. So both of these women are pretty good finishers. Even Amanda Lemos is a great finisher, but she's finishing, women like Lavinia Sosa, who's that one with the Montserrat Ruiz. So there's a clear difference between the women that they're fighting and beating and finishing inside the distance. I do like Amanda Lemos. You got to admit that she does have the size advantage in this fight. It's going to play a role probably over 5 rounds. But Jessica Andrade has the 5-round, championship rounds experience in this fight. I like Amanda Lemos. All of her fights, she is a pretty good pressure fighter, and I do like that. It aids in her. She's not timid to throw, and she's not timid even when she's losing to continue pushing forward. And I think that'll aid her in this fight. But that's how Jessica Andrade has to fight as a 5'1" fighter. To cure up that reach disadvantage. Jessica Andrade plays the role of her opponent's shadow perfectly, and is always following them around and landing those those shots to the body and then the overhands up top. And she's got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu if it does go to the mat, so she's kind of a scary fighter everywhere it goes. And all of the strengths I see for Amanda Lemos, another one is that she's kind of a fast starter too. But so is Jessica Andrade. So it's weird. Every single time that I see a potential, what about this for Amanda Lemos? It's always countered with Jessica Andrade kind of doing it just a little bit better. So I do agree with the price tag. I think over 5 rounds though, it can be close, especially if, like I said, that reach disadvantage can aid in just by the smallest of margins getting more significant strikes on the board per round. But there's also, shockingly enough, there's an age disadvantage for Amanda Lemos here. She's kind of exiting her prime as a fighter here at 115, whereas the much more experienced Jessica Andrade is actually still in her prime at 30 years old. So even though she's got some miles on her as an MMA fighter, it should be in her prime, and she looks very, very fierce, and there's no falling off in her power or in her tenacity or will to win, even though she's kind of fallen short in some of those better female fighter battles she's had against those champions. So doesn't seem to be discouraged at all. I like her to win this fight, if not by decision, inside the distance. It's hard to bank on an inside the distance unless that prop is really juicy at 115, even though it is these two who are finishers. But Jessica Andrade has twice the fights, twice the experience, I think twice the power, and I think she'll win this fight. So give me Jessica Andrade to win. I'll put it over 5 rounds. Give me a 5-round decision for Jessica Andrade. Okay, and there you have it. All 12 fights. I believe there might be a 13th fight that they're adding to this fight card. I haven't done my due diligence and looked into it, so I cannot comment on that fight, but I believe they've added a 13th to it. Maybe we'll have odds on that out soon, but there we are, 12 fights that I know for sure are happening on this card for this weekend's event. I'm pretty excited. Like I said in the beginning, not a whole lot of name value, but I think it will be entertaining, especially with all these wide favorites. Maybe we'll have a big upset. It's always fun to see. Once those price tags start getting, like Alexander Romanov, minus 1,400, Dean Barry, minus 1,200, it kind of leaves that what if feeling. What if we see a big upset? And those are always fun too. So hopefully we can limit our exposure in the spots we're not too confident on, but I think there are some pretty good spots here. So good luck in all your betting action. I'll see you guys later in the week for the best bets and props video.